The rain had been falling since early morning, soft at first, then stronger, turning the streets into mirrors that reflected the gray sky. It was not a normal day for Sundar Pichai. He was in Delhi for a private meeting, something his schedule almost never allowed without months of planning. Yet, today, he was not here for a conference or a public event. He was here for something deeply personal. As his car drove past the familiar buildings, Sundar kept looking out the window, lost in thought. His assistant had told him 3 times already that the Prime Minister's schedule was uncertain today, and there was no guarantee they would get to meet him. Sundar only smiled and said, "It's okay, I can wait." His assistant didn't understand. Sundar was the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world. People usually waited for him, not the other way around. But Sundar didn't care about status today. Today, he was here as a man who wanted to say thank you for something that had happened many years ago. Inside the Prime Minister's residence, the day was as busy as always. Officials moved quickly from one room to another, carrying files, discussing policies, and taking calls. Narendra Modi himself had a packed schedule, with meetings lined up one after the other. The security team was strict. No one could just walk in. Even for someone like Sundar, there were procedures to follow. When Sundar arrived, he was politely told that Modi was in a closed meeting and it might be hours before he was free. Most people would have left and returned later, but Sundar chose to wait. He found a quiet corner in the guest lounge, sat down, and began to recall the memory that had brought him here. It was more than 20 years ago. Long before he became the CEO of Google, Sundar was a young engineer visiting India from the United States. He had a sudden problem with a government document he needed for his family. It was urgent, and the delay meant his father's small business would suffer. He didn't know anyone in power, and his calls for help went unanswered. By sheer coincidence, a local official who knew a member of Modi's team passed on his problem. Sundar never met Modi in person that day, but he later learned that Modi, who was then a state leader, had quietly made a call to speed up the process. The matter was resolved within hours. There was no publicity, no photo opportunity, just a small act that changed Sundar's life in that moment. Over the years, Sundar never forgot. The gesture had taught him something valuable. True leadership is often about helping without expecting recognition. Now, after decades, he finally had the chance to meet Modi face to face and express his gratitude. 3 hours passed. Sundar remained seated, his phone untouched, his eyes occasionally drifting toward the closed meeting room. A few people whispered as they walked by, surprised to see him waiting so patiently. One junior official, curious, asked him softly, "Sir, why are you waiting so long? The Prime Minister is very busy today." Sundar simply smiled and replied, "Because some things in life are worth waiting for." When the doors finally opened, a wave of staff exited the meeting room. Narendra Modi stepped out, his pace brisk, but his eyes quickly caught the familiar face in the corner. For a moment, he seemed surprised. Then, as he walked toward Sundar, the room fell silent. Sundar stood up, feeling a mix of respect and nervousness. The man who had unknowingly helped him so many years ago was now standing in front of him. Modi extended his hand warmly. "Sundar ji, what a surprise. You could have called, and we would have arranged a meeting," he said with a smile. Sundar shook his hand, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Sir, I didn't come here for an arranged meeting. I came here to wait, because I wanted to thank you for something you did a long time ago." Modi tilted his head slightly, curious. "Something I did?" Sundar nodded. "Yes, and it may have been a small favor for you, but for me, it meant everything." The Prime Minister's expression changed from curiosity to quiet interest. "Tell me," he said softly, and in that moment, the years between them began to dissolve. As one man prepared to share a story, the other had no memory of yet, one that had shaped a lifetime. The room was quieter now. A few aides lingered at a respectful distance, but even they seemed curious about what Sundar was about to say. Modi gestured toward a smaller meeting room nearby and invited Sundar to sit. The heavy wooden door closed behind them, shutting out the noise of the busy corridors. Sundar sat down carefully, his hands resting on the table. He took a slow breath before beginning. Sir, it was many years ago. I was just an ordinary engineer back then. I had returned to India for a short visit. My father's business was facing trouble because we were waiting for a clearance document from a government office. Without it, his shipment was stuck and our small income was at risk. Modi listened intently, his eyes steady. Sundar continued, I tried calling different offices, but no one could help. Then, somehow, the issue reached you. You didn't know me. You had no reason to care. But I later learned that you made one phone call to the right department, and within hours, the document was ready. My father never forgot that day. Neither did I. For a moment, Modi was silent. He leaned back slightly in his chair, as if searching his memory. I don't remember this exact case, he admitted, but I believe small acts of help are part of what we must do. You didn't need to thank me after all these years. Sundar smiled faintly. Sir, maybe you didn't expect thanks. But I have built my life on certain principles, and one of them is never forgetting kindness. I learned that from my parents. When someone does good for you, you acknowledge it no matter how much time has passed. The Prime Minister's expression softened. That is rare in today's world, he said quietly. Most people move on quickly, especially when they become successful. Sundar looked down for a moment, thinking about the journey from his childhood in Chennai to becoming the CEO of Google. There had been struggles, sacrifices, and moments of doubt, but the values he carried from his family had been his compass. Success, he said, means nothing if you forget the people who helped you along the way. Modi nodded slowly, then leaned forward. Tell me, Sundar-ji, what made you decide to come in person and wait for hours, just for this? Sundar hesitated, then answered honestly. Because I know how precious your time is. I wanted to show you that this was important to me. If I had asked for a quick meeting, it would feel like a formality. I wanted this moment to mean something, not just to me, but also to you. There was a pause. Modi's gaze softened even more, as if he was seeing Sundar not as a global executive, but as the same young man who had once been in need of help. You remind me, Modi said slowly, that sometimes the smallest things we do can leave the deepest mark on someone's life. We may forget them, but they may carry them forever. Just then, there was a knock on the door. An aide entered to remind Modi of his next appointment. The Prime Minister looked at the clock, then turned back to Sundar. I have a meeting in 5 minutes, but I want you to stay here until I return. I want to hear more not just about that day, but about your journey after it. Sundar nodded. Respectfully, I will wait, sir. As Modi left the room, Sundar found himself alone again, his thoughts returning to the path he had taken in life. He didn't know that the next part of their conversation would uncover something even he hadn't expected, something that would connect their lives in a deeper way than he had imagined. The clock ticked softly in the quiet room. Sundar sat with his hands clasped, his mind wandering back to the struggles of his early life. Outside, he could hear the faint murmur of voices and footsteps in the hallway. 3 minutes passed. Then, 5. Finally, the door opened again, and Modi stepped back in, his pace slower now. As if ready to listen, he took his seat across from Thank you for waiting, Modi said. Now tell me what happened after that day. How did your path take you from that small problem to where you are now? Sundar leaned forward slightly. After that day, my father told me something I never forgot. He said, son, the worth of a person is not measured by how much they take, but by how much they give. I carried that lesson through my studies. my career, and even in the toughest moments when I felt like giving up, I kept thinking about how one person's small action can change someone's direction. That kept me going. Modi nodded, listening with interest. Sundar continued, years later, when I was working in the United States, there were times I wanted to return to India, but opportunities kept pulling me forward. Still, no matter where I went, that one act of kindness was in my mind. It reminded me that leadership means seeing the human side, not just the position or the rules. Modi's eyes narrowed slightly, as if a thought had crossed his mind. Tell me, Sundar ji, what was your father's name? Sundar answered without hesitation. Raghunatha Pichai. The Prime Minister's expression changed subtle, but enough for Sundar to notice. Raghunatha. Raghunatha, Modi repeated quietly, almost to himself. Was he involved in a small manufacturing business in Tamil Nadu? Sundar was surprised. Yes, sir. You know about it. Modi leaned back, a distant look in his eyes. Many years ago, before I even became chief minister, I visited a rural development fair in Tamil Nadu. I met a man who made precision parts for small machines. He spoke to me about the challenges of getting government approvals on time. I remember he was polite but very determined. He even gave me a handwritten note about how delays hurt small businesses. I still remember his face. Sundar's heart skipped a beat. Sir, that was my father. He told me about meeting a leader at an event who actually listened to him. He didn't know who you were at the time, just that you took his notes seriously. The realization hit them both at the same moment. This wasn't just a random favor. Modi had unknowingly met Sundar's father in person all those years ago, and that meeting had planted the seed for the very favor Sundar was here to thank him for today. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The connection was deeper than either had guessed. Sundar felt a sudden wave of emotion. Sir, he said quietly, this is more than I imagined. I thought I was here to thank you for one small act, but it turns out you had already touched my family's life even before that. Modi's voice was gentle. Life has strange ways of weaving stories, Sundar ji. Sometimes the kindness we give returns to us in forms we never expect. Sundar sat back, his mind racing. He had planned to share his gratitude and leave, but now it felt like this meeting was part of something bigger, something still unfolding, and he could feel that what was about to come next might change the meaning of the day entirely. Outside, the rain had stopped, and a pale light was slipping through the window, casting soft shadows across the table. The air in the room felt heavier now, not because of tension, but because both men understood they were no longer talking as a prime minister and a CEO. They were talking as two human beings whose lives had crossed in quiet, unseen ways. Modi leaned forward slightly, his hands resting on the table. Sundar ji, there is something I never told anyone about that trip to Tamil Nadu. When I met your father, I had already been dealing with a difficult situation. I was under pressure to attend multiple events that day, and my team told me to skip the rural development fair, but I insisted on going. I didn't know why at the time, I just felt it was important. He paused, looking straight into Sundar's eyes. Now I understand why. Sundar listened quietly, his curiosity growing. What happened that day, sir? Modi's voice lowered, as if sharing something personal. Your father's note stayed with me a week later. I used it as an example in a meeting with other leaders. I told them about how small businesses struggle not because they lack skill, but because they lack timely support. That conversation led to a small policy change in that state. It wasn't much, but it made it easier for hundreds of small business owners to get their documents faster. Sundar was taken aback. Sir, you mean my father's note helped change a policy? Modi nodded. Yes, and now, years later, his son is one of the most influential people in the world. Do you see how life connects things? The words sank deep into Sundar's heart. But before he could respond, there was another knock on the door. This time, the aide's expression was urgent. "Sir," he said to Modi, "you are needed immediately. There is an important call waiting from overseas." Modi glanced at Sundar, hesitated for a second, and then said, "Give me 2 minutes." The aide left, and the room fell silent again. Sundar could sense something shifting. Modi leaned forward once more. "Sundar ji, before I go, there is something I want to ask you. It is not about politics, and it is not about business. It is something personal." Sundar was curious now. "What is it, sir?" Modi's eyes held a strange seriousness. "What is the one thing you still regret, not in your career, but in your life?" The question caught Sundar off guard. He had expected to speak about gratitude and old memories, not to be asked about regrets. But as he sat there, the answer rose in his mind, uninvited, yet clear. He thought about the one person he had lost touch with, the one promise he had never fulfilled. He looked at Modi and said softly, "There is one thing, and it has been with me for many years." Modi leaned in slightly. "Then maybe," he said, "this is the day you finally change that." The room felt smaller now, as if the walls themselves were listening. Sundar hesitated, his gaze dropping to the table for a moment before he spoke. "Sir, when I was in college, there was a close friend of mine named Arjun. He came from a poor family but was brilliant, the kind of person who could solve any problem. We shared notes, studied late into the night, and dreamed about building something together one day." He paused, the memory forming clearly in his mind. "But during our final year, Arjun's father fell seriously ill. He needed money for treatment, and I was already struggling with my own tuition. I tried to help in small ways, but it wasn't enough. He eventually dropped out to work and support his family. We promised we would meet again once life settled down. I went abroad for my career, and I never saw him again." Sundar's voice grew softer. "Years later, I heard that his father passed away, and Arjun had to take over a small repair shop. I wanted to reach out, but by then, my life had become a whirlwind of travel, meetings, and responsibilities. The years kept slipping by, and now, I don't even know where he is." Modi listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. "So your regret is not helping him enough back then?" Sundar nodded slowly. "Yes, I could have done more. I should have done more." Modi leaned back, tapping the table lightly with his fingers. "Sundar ji, life gives us chances when we least expect them. Sometimes, it is not too late to fulfill an old promise." Sundar looked up, almost hopeful. "Do you really think I can find him after all this time?" Modi's eyes were calm but certain. "If you truly want to, yes. I have learned that when the heart is determined, the path appears. Tell me his full name, and we will try." Sundar felt a mix of surprise and gratitude. "Arjun Mehta," he said. Modi stood up and walked to the door. He spoke briefly to one of his aides outside, his voice low but firm. The aide nodded and disappeared down the corridor. When Modi returned to his seat, there was a new energy in the room. "I have asked someone to begin searching. It may take a little time, but I believe we will find him." Sundar exhaled slowly. "Sir, thank you. If this works, it will mean more to me than you can imagine." Modi smiled faintly. "I can imagine, because I have been in your place before, carrying the weight of a promise I thought I would never fulfill." There was a moment of quiet between them, filled with mutual respect. Outside, the rain clouds had completely cleared, and sunlight now touched the windows. Neither of them knew it yet, but the search for Arjun would not just reconnect to old friends, it would uncover something neither man had expected, something that would turn this day into a story neither would ever forget. The hours passed slowly. Sundar remained in the quiet meeting room, sipping tea that had long gone cold. Every sound from the hallway made his heart race, hoping it was the aide returning with news. Modi had left for his overseas call, but promised to come back before the end of the day. Finally, the door opened. The aide stepped in, his face calm but with a spark in his eyes. "Sir," he said to Sundar, "we found him. He lives in a small town 2 hours from here. He runs a modest workshop, repairing old radios and fans." We spoke to him. When we told him your name, he went silent for a long time. Then he said, "Tell him I still remember the promise." Sundar's chest tightened. The years between them suddenly felt like nothing. "Can we bring him here?" he asked quickly. The aide nodded. "We already have someone on the way to get him." 2 hours later, the sound of footsteps in the hallway made Sundar stand. The door opened, and there he was, Arjun, older, his hair touched with gray, his hands marked by years of labor, but his eyes were exactly the same. For a moment, they just looked at each other, frozen in time. Then Arjun stepped forward, and Sundar closed the distance between them. They embraced, not with words, but with the kind of silence that speaks louder than anything. "You came," Arjun said finally, his voice low. "I should have come sooner," Sundar replied. "I'm sorry for all the years." Arjun shook his head. "Life took us where it had to, but I never doubted that if the time was right, we would meet again." At that moment, Modi entered the room quietly, watching them with a faint smile. "Sometimes," he said, "it takes more than luck for people to meet again. It takes the will of both hearts." They sat together, the three of them, sharing stories that stretched back decades. Arjun spoke about his struggles, about how he had almost given up on his dreams, and how the memory of their friendship had kept him going. Sundar listened, feeling both pride and guilt, determined to make things right. Before the evening ended, Sundar made a promise, one he would keep. He would help expand Arjun's small workshop into a training center, giving young people in his town the skills to earn a living. "You once told me," Sundar said to Arjun, "that our dreams would help others someday. It's time we make that happen." Modi, listening quietly, added, "This is what true leadership is, not just building companies or leading nations, but building people." As the sun set over Delhi, the three men stepped outside. The rain-washed streets glistened under the warm glow of the evening lights. Sundar realized that what began as a simple thank you had become something much greater, an unbroken chain of kindness, passing from one person to another, across years and distances. And as they parted that night, Sundar knew one thing for certain: no matter how far life takes you, some debts of the heart can only be repaid in person. The next morning, the air in Delhi was fresh after the night's rain. Sundar woke earlier than usual, his mind still replaying the events of the previous day. The long wait, the unexpected connection with Modi, and the reunion with Arjun had left him feeling lighter, as if a quiet weight he had carried for years had finally been set down. Over breakfast, he thought about what came next. This meeting was not just an ending, it was a beginning. The promise he made to Arjun was not a gesture for the cameras, not something to tick off a list. It was a responsibility, one that would honor their past and create something meaningful for others. Later that day, Sundar met Arjun and Modi again, in a smaller room, away from the official offices. They spoke about the training center idea in detail, how it could start small, using Arjun's workshop as the base, and then grow into something that could give hundreds of young people a chance to learn and earn. Arjun's voice was steady, but emotional. "I've spent years repairing broken things," he said, "but this will be about building something new, not just for me, but for everyone in my town." Sundar smiled. "And you'll be the one leading it. I'll provide the resources, but you'll give it life." Modi listened quietly, then said, "This is how true change happens. One friendship, one promise, one community at a time." They spent the next hours planning, sketching ideas on paper, and making calls. Sundar arranged for a team from his company's India office to visit Arjun's town within the week. Modi offered to connect them with local officials to ensure the project would move without unnecessary delays. It felt as if the past, present, and future were all sitting at the same table, working together. Before leaving, Sundar turned to Modi and said, "Sir, yesterday I came here to thank you. Today I leave with something more, a reminder that gratitude should lead to action." Modi smiled warmly. And action, when guided by the heart, becomes a legacy. Outside, as Sundar and Arjun stood side by side, they looked out over the city. The sky was clear now, the air carrying the faint sound of traffic and life moving forward. Sundar thought about how easily this meeting could have never happened. He had chosen not to wait. If Modi had skipped that rural fair years ago, if Arjun's memory had faded, but fate had kept the threads intact, waiting for the right moment to tie them together again. As they parted, Sundar knew their story was no longer about regret. It was about what comes after. He had learned that the truest way to honor a kindness from the past is to create kindness in the present, so it can ripple into the future. And somewhere deep inside, he understood that this was not just the end of a story. It was the start of many more.